Go to any boating forum right now, type in one brand name, and watch the warnings pile up. Stay away, it's a disaster. Run while you can. Thousands of comments, exposed, destroyed, buried. But here's what they won't tell you. This motor won an award no outboard had ever won before. It beat 4 strokes at their own game. And the owners who actually run them, they call it the best engine they've ever had. So why does the internet despise it? Why did the company that built it walk away? And what do the people who refuse to sell know that everyone else missed? This is the untold story of an engineering triumph that became an orphan, and the truth hiding beneath the hate. May 27, 2020, a press release landed that shook the boating world to its core. BRP, Bombardier Recreational Products, the Canadian conglomerate behind Ski-Doo snowmobiles and Sea-Doo watercraft, announced they would immediately cease production of all Evinrude outboard motors. Not wind down, not transition, immediately. 650 employees at the Sturtevant, Wisconsin facility would lose their jobs. Over a century of American marine innovation would end with a quarterly earnings call. The timing made no sense. It was the middle of a global pandemic. Boat sales were about to explode as millions of Americans sought outdoor escapes. Dealers couldn't keep inventory on the lot. And here was one of the oldest names in boating, walking away from it all. To understand what died that day, you have to go back to where it started. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 1907. A Norwegian immigrant named Ole Evinrude was working in a machine shop, tinkering with an idea that would change recreation forever. He wanted to build a motor you could attach to any rowboat, something portable, something powerful, something that would let ordinary people travel on water without breaking their backs with oars. By 1909, he had it, the first commercially successful outboard motor. A single-cylinder, 1.5 horsepower engine that weighed 62 pounds and could push a small boat at 5 miles per hour. It wasn't much by today's standards, but it was revolutionary. Ole Evinrude had invented an industry. For the next 100 years, the Evinrude name meant something. It meant innovation. It meant reliability. It meant weekends on the water with family, fishing trips at dawn, the freedom that comes from a motor that starts when you need it to start. Generations of Americans grew up with Evinrude on the transom. It was as American as the lakes and rivers it traveled. And then, with a single press release, it was over. Jose Boisjoli, BRP's chief executive, delivered the corporate eulogy with carefully chosen words. Our outboard engines business has been greatly impacted by COVID-19, obliging us to discontinue production of our outboard motors immediately. This business segment had already been facing some challenges, and the impact from the current context has forced our hand. Read that again. Already been facing some challenges. Forced our hand. This wasn't a company mourning a failure. This was a company seizing an opportunity to exit a business they'd been struggling with for years. The pandemic didn't kill Evinrude, it just provided convenient cover. Within weeks, the narrative calcified. The motor that powered Evinrude's final years, a technology called E-TEC, wasn't just discontinued. It became radioactive. Dealers who had sold them for a decade suddenly steered customers away. Forums filled with warnings from people who had never owned one, but had heard things. Used boat values collapsed overnight. But scroll deeper into those threads, past the warnings from armchair experts, past the secondhand horror stories, and you'll find something strange. Actual E-TEC owners, people with thousands of hours on these motors, defending them with something approaching religious devotion. My 2008 has 1,100 hours without a single problem. Best fuel economy I've ever seen on any outboard. I've owned Yamaha, Mercury, Honda. The E-TEC beats them all. Two completely different realities. The internet screams danger. The owners praised performance. Someone is wrong. And to find out who, we have to go back further. To the disaster that created the hatred in the first place. The year 2000. The marine industry was about to witness one of the most spectacular corporate collapses in its history. Outboard Marine Corporation, OMC, was the giant that owned both Evinrude and Johnson, two of the most respected names in boating. For decades, they had dominated the outboard market. Their motors powered everything from base boats to offshore fishing rigs. They were the establishment, and they were dying. The killer had a name: Ficht. It was a fuel injection technology developed in partnership with a German engineering firm. On paper, it was supposed to revolutionize two-stroke outboards. Direct injection would make them cleaner, more efficient, more powerful. It would answer the environmental critics who said two-strokes were dirty relics of the past. Ficht was going to save the company. Instead, it destroyed it. The problem started almost immediately. Fuel injectors failed without warning. Engine management computers fried themselves. Power heads overheated and seized. Owners who had spent $15,000, $20,000, sometimes $30,000 on new rigs found themselves stranded on the water with engines that wouldn't run. Dealers were overwhelmed. Warranty claims piled up faster than technicians could process them. Parts weren't available. Fixes didn't work. And the complaints spread through the boating community like wildfire. Word of mouth in marinas is brutal and permanent. Once a motor gets a reputation for failure, that reputation sticks for generations. December 22, 2000, just 3 days before Christmas, Outboard Marine Corporation filed for bankruptcy. Thousands of employees lost their jobs in the week families were supposed to be celebrating. Hundreds of thousands of Ficht owners were abandoned. No warranty support, no parts pipeline, no answers. Just expensive machines that didn't work, and a company that no longer existed to fix them. The trauma of that collapse embedded itself in the collective memory of the boating world. Evinrude became synonymous with failure. The name that once meant reliability now meant risk, and that stigma would poison everything that came after. 1 year later, in 2001, a Canadian company made a bet that seemed almost reckless. BRP, flush with success from their Ski-Doo and Sea-Doo brands, acquired Evinrude from the bankruptcy wreckage. They paid pennies on the dollar for a brand that many thought was worthless. But BRP didn't buy Evinrude to bury it. They bought it to rebuild it. And instead of abandoning the direct injection concept that had killed OMC, they doubled down on it. This is where the story takes a turn that the internet doesn't understand. BRP's engineers didn't resurrect Ficht. They started from scratch. They kept the core idea: direct fuel injection for a cleaner, more efficient two-stroke. But they rebuilt every component around it. New injectors based on Lawrence coil technology, the same electromagnetic principle that makes speakers work. New engine management software written from the ground up. New combustion strategies that could switch between different fuel delivery patterns depending on engine speed and load. They called it E-TEC. And in 2004, they unveiled something the marine industry had never seen before: a two-stroke outboard that was cleaner than four strokes. That's not marketing spin. That's federal testing data. The Environmental Protection Agency put E-TEC engines through rigorous emissions analysis and found something remarkable. Carbon monoxide output was 30 to 50% lower than comparable four-stroke outboards. At idle speeds, CO emissions were 50 to 100 times lower. Particulate matter was reduced by 30 to 40% compared to motors already classified as ultra-low emission. The EPA was so impressed that they did something unprecedented. They gave the Evinrude E-TEC their Clean Air Excellence Award, the first time an outboard motor had ever received that recognition. But almost nobody heard about it. The shadow of Ficht was simply too long. No matter how many awards the E-TEC won, no matter how clean the emissions data showed it to be, the boating public had already made up its mind. Two-stroke meant dirty. Evinrude meant trouble. The conversation was over before it started. But for the owners who actually bought E-TECs, the ones who ignored the forum warnings and took a chance, a different reality emerged. And it started with one word that four-stroke owners rarely heard: torque. Two-stroke engines operate on a fundamentally different principle than four-strokes. A four-stroke fires once every 2 revolutions of the crankshaft. A two-stroke fires on every revolution. Twice as many power pulses, twice as much immediate thrust. Combined with E-TEC's stratified injection and tuned exhaust system, this created something that four-stroke competitors struggled to match: brutal, instant acceleration from a dead stop. In independent testing, an E-TEC 90 pushed a loaded 19-foot fishing boat onto plane in under 3 seconds. In shallow water launches, where you need to get up and moving before you run out of depth, E-TECs consistently outperformed larger four-stroke motors. Charter captains reported getting heavy boats loaded with passengers and gear onto plane faster than they'd ever experienced with other brands. And then there was weight. A typical E-TEC 150 weighed 455 pounds. Comparable four-stroke 150s ranged from 548 to 590 pounds. That's nearly 100 pounds of difference hanging off your transom. On boats designed for two-stroke power, and most boats built before 2010 were designed exactly that way, that weight savings transformed handling. Better balance, better fuel economy, better performance in every measurable category. But the weight and torque advantages weren't what converted skeptics. It was the fuel efficiency data. The knock on two-strokes had always been gas consumption. Traditional carbureted two-strokes wasted fuel through incomplete combustion. Oil mixed with gasoline meant dirty exhaust and poor mileage. Everyone knew four-strokes were more efficient. Everyone was wrong. E-TEC's direct injection changed the equation entirely. In a boat test comparison, an E-TEC 300 mounted on a Dusky 233 was faster and more fuel efficient at wide-open throttle than four-stroke competitors on similar hulls. The test conditions actually favored the competition. The E-TEC boat was tested on a hotter day with a heavier fuel load. It didn't matter. The numbers spoke for themselves. A 10-year ownership study published by Ocean Skiff Journal found even more dramatic results. At trolling speeds, E-TEC fuel economy improved 50% compared to the carbureted two-stroke it replaced. At slow idle, the improvement approached 10 times better efficiency. Owners could troll all day without fouling spark plugs, something that had plagued traditional two-strokes for decades. The second-generation G2 motors, released in 2014, pushed efficiency even further. Controlled testing showed the G2 was 29% more fuel efficient than the already impressive first-generation E-TEC. That's approaching diesel territory in a gasoline outboard. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect wasn't performance at all. It was maintenance. A typical four-stroke outboard requires dealer service every 100 hours. Oil changes, filter replacements, valve adjustments. Hours in the shop, thousands of dollars over a motor's lifetime. The E-TEC maintenance interval was 300 hours, or 3 years, whichever came first. 3 times longer between services than the competition. No break-in period was required. There were no valves to adjust because there were no valves. The motor featured automatic winterization that activated with a simple key sequence. A pinpoint oiling system applied lubricant only where needed, only when needed. The E-TEC was designed to spend its life on the water, not waiting for service appointments. For owners who maintained them properly, that promise held true. So if the E-TEC was cleaner than four-strokes, more fuel efficient than the competition, lighter, more powerful at low end, and required less maintenance, why did BRP kill it? The answer has nothing to do with engineering. It has everything to do with spreadsheets. In 2019, the year before BRP pulled the plug, Evinrude held less than 7% of the North American outboard market. Yamaha and Mercury combined controlled over 80%. The math was devastating. Every E-TEC sold required supporting an entire ecosystem: dealer networks, parts inventories, technical training programs, warranty reserves, marketing campaigns. These infrastructure costs don't scale down gracefully when your market share shrinks. At 7%, Evinrude was spending nearly as much to support its small slice of the market as competitors spent dominating theirs. The margins were being crushed, but market share doesn't shrink by accident. It shrinks because of perception, and perception in the marine industry travels through dealer networks. Walk into a marina anywhere in Florida, Texas, or California, and you'll find Yamaha and Mercury dealers within minutes. They're everywhere. Factory-trained technicians, parts in stock, warranty work handled quickly. That network creates confidence. Buyers choose brands they know they can service locally. Evinrude dealers were sparse and getting sparser. As the brand struggled, dealers defected to more profitable lines. As dealers defected, buyers had fewer options for service and support. As buyers went elsewhere, market share dropped further. The spiral fed on itself. And underneath it all, the Fichte curse kept working its poison. Even in 2019, nearly 2 decades after the bankruptcy, dealers reported customers walking away at the mention of Evinrude. Salespeople learned to lead with the technology, not the brand name. The name itself had become radioactive. Tracy Crocker, the president of BRP's Marine Division, tried to reverse the decline. The G2 series was genuinely competitive. In many ways superior to anything Yamaha or Mercury offered. But superior products don't automatically win markets. Marketing does. Distribution does. Brand perception, Suaban does. And Evinrude was losing on all 3 fronts. Then came 2020. The pandemic. Boat sales were about to surge in ways nobody predicted. Americans stuck at home, forbidden from restaurants and movie theaters and gyms, discovered that boats offered something precious: outdoor activity that was inherently socially distanced. Dealers who had struggled to move inventory suddenly couldn't keep boats in stock. BRP saw their moment, not to ride the wave with Evinrude, but to exit cleanly while the distraction was maximum. The May 27th announcement blamed COVID explicitly. Our outboard engines business has been greatly impacted by COVID-19, obliging us to discontinue production immediately. But industry insiders read between the lines. The phrase "already been facing some challenges" told the real story. This decision had been coming for years. The pandemic just accelerated the timeline and provided cover. Would alternatives have been explored without COVID? Almost certainly. The Evinrude brand had value. The G2 technology was genuinely innovative. A sale to another manufacturer, a licensing deal, a restructured operation focused on niche markets, all were possibilities that a normal business environment might have produced. Instead, BRP chose a clean break. They promised to honor existing warranties, maintain parts supply, and support their dealer network through the transition. And to their credit, 5 years later, those promises have largely been kept. OEM parts remain available. Specialty suppliers stock comprehensive inventories. Factory-trained technicians still exist. But the damage was done. Not to the motors. They kept running just fine. The damage was to values. Used boats with E-TECs collapsed in price overnight. Owners who needed to sell found themselves underwater. Their motors suddenly worth thousands less than comparable Yamahas or Mercuries. The forums told them to panic. Sell now, before parts dry up. Dump the boat. Take the loss. Move on. The brand is dead. The motor is worthless. Get out while you can. Some listened. They flooded the used market with E-TEC-powered boats, accepting lowball offers from buyers who understood something the sellers didn't. They walked away from motors that had never given them a moment of trouble, convinced by strangers on the internet that disaster was imminent. But many didn't sell. They stayed. In the years since BRP's announcement, something remarkable happened. Instead of abandoning ship, E-TEC owners organized. The E-TEC Owners Group, a forum community that predates the shutdown, became a lifeline. Factory-trained technicians who had lost their dealership jobs shared diagnostic procedures. Owners traded intelligence on parts availability. Veterans helped newcomers troubleshoot problems that remaining dealers wouldn't touch. This wasn't denial. This was rational calculation. Many of these owners had run their E-TECs for over 1,000 hours. They had years of first-hand reliability data. They knew exactly how these motors performed because they'd been watching the fuel gauges and hour meters the whole time. The forums were full of fear. Their logbooks were full of facts. Specialty shops emerged to fill the void. Barnacle Bill's Marine Supply built an entire business around E-TEC support. Parts, service kits, injector cleaning, technical guidance. Day Brothers boats on Lake Champlain kept certified technicians on staff. Crowley Marine and Boats.net maintained comprehensive OEM parts inventories. The support network didn't disappear. It just moved underground. And here's what the internet hate actually created: opportunity. A 2020 base boat with a well-maintained G2 E-TEC sells for $10,000 to $15,000, less than an identical boat with a Yamaha. Not because the motor is inferior, not because parts are unavailable, simply because buyers are afraid of a name. For informed purchasers willing to do their homework, this fear translates directly into value. The key is due diligence. E-TEC motors store complete operational histories in their engine management modules. Every hour of runtime, every RPM range, every alarm code ever triggered. A qualified technician can extract a full picture of how that motor lived its life, whether it was pampered by a weekend fisherman or beaten by a rental fleet. Find a motor with documented dealer service, reasonable hours, and a clean diagnostic report. Verify that a certified E-TEC mechanic exists within reasonable distance. Factor in the reality that resale value will remain suppressed. If the math works, and for many buyers, it works beautifully, you may be purchasing the best value on the water. So what actually died when Evinrude ended? Not the motors. They're still running, still delivering torque that makes four-stroke owners jealous, still burning fuel with efficiency that surprised even their engineers, still starting on the first turn of the key, winter after winter, season after season. What died was competition. The outboard market is now effectively a duopoly. Yamaha and Mercury control the conversation. Without Evinrude pushing boundaries, proving that two strokes could be clean, that direct injection could outperform port injection, that 300-hour service intervals were possible, the pressure to innovate diminishes. Prices stay high. Progress slows. Ole Evinrude built his first outboard in a Milwaukee machine shop because he wanted to make time on the water easier for ordinary people. His company survived world wars, recessions, and technological revolutions. It didn't survive a spreadsheet. But the motors he inspired, the ones still firing up every weekend, still pushing boats through morning fog, still delivering on promises made by engineers who believed in what they built. Those motors don't care about quarterly earnings reports. They just run.